Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Everything But the Song podcast. My name is Tal Vaisman, and I'll be your host for this hour or so. So with this being the first episode ever, I should probably explain what the idea behind this podcast is. So like I said, I'm Tal Vaisman. I'm a guitar player, a music producer, recording engineer, songwriter, composer. I am a lucky person who's able to make a living off of making music. And my experience has always been talking to many musicians that I collaborate with, work with, write with, all kinds of things. And naturally, we end up talking a lot about music, but we also get to talk a lot about their lives and what brought them to where they are today, what inspires them to write songs, what kind of pursuits they have that aren't musical at all. And I find that very interesting. I find that it's something that people don't talk about enough. In this world where people try to kind of curate their image and the way they are perceived. And I thought to myself, I've grown to like a lot of artists more by learning about their lives, their passions, what drives them to do what they do other than music, because music is an expression at the end of the day. And, art doesn't mean anything when there's no life experiences to reference them back to. So with that in mind, I thought, I know a lot of musicians who are just also really cool people who do cool things, and I'd like to talk to them about it and see if anybody else cares to listen. So here goes nothing. Obviously, if you didn't catch the name, Everything But the Song, it's kind of the opposite of another existing podcast, and that's not a coincidence. My good friend Mike McDonnell, a long time ago, started a podcast called All About the Song, in which he focuses on, the songs, the artists, the music. And I find that podcast to be awesome, and I'm a huge fan of it, and I'm a very, very, very big fan of Mike as a person, as a musician, and just as my dear friend. And recently I had the idea of saying like, hey, Mike, we're both huge podcast fans. How about I start a sister podcast to yours, but instead of it being about the music, I'll make it about everything but the music. And Mike thought it was a great idea. So, either we're both crazy or we're on to something. So we'll see about that. But anyhow, without further ado, I'd like to introduce my first guest, which, as you may have guessed by now, is Mike McDonnell, the creator of All About the Song podcast, a phenomenal bass player, guitar player, lead singer, songwriter, and many, many, many more things which you'll find out about soon. During normal non-pandemic times, you can find Mike playing bass with a band called Jumple. You can also find Mike playing bass for my band, Kadima. But you can also find Mike playing guitar and singing songs he wrote in the awesome and very exciting band Good Luck Shop. I will actually start this episode by playing my favorite Good Luck Shop song, and then we'll have a little chat. So hopefully you enjoy it. If you do, please subscribe, leave comments, leave notes, leave anything you want. Any feedback is welcome. I'm just starting out with this endeavor, and I definitely don't think I know everything, so tell me what you would like to hear, and hope you enjoy it. Here we go, episode 1 of Everything But the Song.
affecting me. So here we stand, what is it that we are? The closer we hold up. What has happened here? When your feelings folded up, I had to keep mine clear. Hard to be the one in, hard to find a way out. 'Cause if you come back running, I'm now the one without. I've been lost in a memory. Affection is all that's affected me. So here we stand, what is it that we are? The closer we get, the feeling feels so far. And if you wanted things another way, then you should be saying and stay instead of walking away. Instead of walking away. Instead of walking away. I've been lost in affection. So here we stand, what is it that we are? The closer we get, the feeling feels so. I've been lost in a memory. Affection is all that's affected me. So here we stand, what is it that we are? The closer we get, the feeling feels so.
Welcome, episode 1 of the long-awaited and highly critical Everything But the Song podcast. There is a really awesome podcast called All About the Song. This is what happens when that podcast ends. And who would be the better guest to start this journey? No one other than the creator of All About the Song, Mr. Mike McDonnell.
Thank you, Tal.
You're welcome. So we're kind of doing this off the cuff because you are the first guest and we're just having fun with this first episode, but also you and I talk as if we're on a podcast pretty much anytime we talk. I don't think we have phone calls that last less than 15 minutes. And that's on the very, very stingy side. And that's only because one of us is in a rush.
Yeah.
But the reality is, we talk about everything. Like, we're both musicians who love making music and recently started making music together. But we talk about everything other than music. And the idea for this podcast, I think, came from that notion that, like, wow, we all have conversations as musicians about non-musical issues.
Yeah.
And how awesome would it be to know what people think, how people's lives are when they're not making music, or what kind of music they end up writing because of the way their lives are working out.
Well, absolutely. You got to be doing so many things to be a complete person.
Yeah.
And you need to have a life outside of music to have something to write about, to experience, to reflect on, to enjoy.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Another passion that you and I share is comedy.
Yeah.
And how much we love comedians and their podcasts. And, somebody like Bill Burr, who's a freaking football enthusiast, an aviation enthusiast, loves cooking, loves doing all these things. And then somehow all that finds its way back into his comedy and makes it so much more interesting. So, knowing you, I'm going to just direct this conversation right at you. You're a guy who does many things, one of which is having an awesome podcast. And again, I know you as Mike McDonnell, the colorful bass player. I know you as Mike McDonnell, the charismatic frontman. I know you as Mike McDonnell, the songwriter and the logic tinkerer. But then there's all these other sides of you. You're a painter. You're a beer enthusiast. You, you're also a huge basketball fan. You're into sports. You're into all kinds of things. We went skateboarding together.
Yeah.
You have many interests. So I think maybe the way to start this off would be like, okay, Mike, what the hell are you into? Tell me. What's life for you?
You know what? It's funny because we've talked about this, but even you just asking me this now, it's kind of, it's refreshing because I think with music, you stick to the subject for a large portion of when you're talking about yourself. And I think it's something that's been drummed into us early on is that you always discuss music stuff with musicians. And when you're speaking about artistry or you're presenting yourself as an artist, that's what's in the forefront. But as you're saying, there are a lot of other things I do. And it's funny because most of the things that I do are really woven around music, but have equal importance to everything else to music as well. I got into music at a very early age. Like I really enjoyed certain songs that I heard on the radio coming home from like late night hockey games and hockey practices. Hockey was a big thing that I started doing when I was 3 years old. That was, let's say, the first interest I had outside of, school, television. I had a brother. Hockey was something that I don't think it was like a decision. It was just like what I was going to do.
But was that, do you remember if that was like a thing that your parents were like, hey, you should play hockey? Or is that just like something you remember from the age of 3 years old, just seeing around you and saying like, well, obviously I want to do it?
It was so early in my development that it was like, okay, we're going to hockey today. And you're like, all right, cool. And there was like a lead up because you had to get like your equipment and stuff like that. And Hockey Night in Canada is a big thing. And some of my friends were doing it. In particular, two of my oldest and dearest friends, Michael Sleeth and Michael Carria.
All right.
Which makes telling stories about them on a podcast incredibly difficult. But they are two of my best friends, and I've spent my whole life with them. We have been separated for very little times in that. And it just seemed like it was equivalent to going to school to play hockey because it was like what you did on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
So that was a really cool thing to get into because it was the first time that like outside of like super early development, like walking and talking, I had to learn a skill. It was skating.
Yeah.
And that was a really trying period. Even though I was so young, it's really friggin' hard.
Oh, I know. I only learned to skate when I like moved to Canada because I've never needed to. And all of a sudden I'm, dating a D who is now my wife. And, she's like, oh, I want to go to Nathan Phillips Square to skate. I'm like, sure. She's like, have you ever skated before? I'm like, no. And then, so yeah. And I've experienced how difficult that is. And yeah, so I can definitely imagine how a young, like whatever, 3-year-old is like, that could be a bit of a trying period.
Yeah, it's like you're ankle skating and you're just trying to speed up. And it's funny because I have a very different perspective on it. I did all my community service hours in high school volunteering at those Learn to Play programs. And then I was a hockey referee, which was my first job.
Right.
And so I officiated these young players and watched. And even in my mid-20s, I time kept them for a period of time. So I've kind of watched this early development in different developments of my own life. And I've gained like a wide range of perspective on this. And it was a huge thing to do at the time because it was something that you lean on later in life, like development, figuring out how to learn a new chord or something like that, skating. You like it. You're into it.
Do you think that having gone through hockey and experiencing, a learning curve in a certain skill set is something you can find clear parallels with in music?
Yes. One of the things too is being on a team was such a cool thing. You wear the same uniform, you take care of your players, even if you don't, he's not your best friend. Yeah. Like he's your guy.
Yeah.
And it's something that I've found playing in bands that I absolutely love and cherish more now than ever, but
Yeah.
I think always. But that like team mentality. And
Exactly.
I liked being on a team. I liked the jersey. I liked my friends having jerseys. I liked that we had numbers.
Right.
You know, our sponsor, like Carbouzzi's or Bruno's Fine Foods, all the neighborhoods. Let's like, those were like things that united us, and that was really cool to learn.
Yeah.
And that was something that I really enjoyed, and I loved playing hockey, and I loved this like weekend thing of like a practice on Saturday, hockey night in Canada, Saturday night, then Sunday night game. Then you go to school the next day.
Wow.
It was just like, it was something that was really cool, and it was the first time that I really started to enjoy like a hobby, a passion.
Right. It's also probably your first experience of total immersion. Did you ever think like, okay, this is something I want to pursue? Or was it just more like, it's just what everybody's doing. It's just in my life and I'm doing it.
Oh yeah, I was going in the NHL, just like every other kid was. Like,
Right.
it was just like, kind of like obvious. Like, of course I am. Yeah, and I'll
amazing.
play on Team Canada, and then I'll get drafted in the first round. Look, listen, like, I'll go like 12th. I'm no first overall. That's where
Right.
Michael Sleeth, he's going first overall. He's so fast.
Right.
And that was something that was really cool through the development of growing up. And I played from age 3 to 18. When I went to middle school, I decided, my father went to a school in Toronto called St. Mike's, and I thought that it would be a good idea to go there. I always planned to go there.
Yep.
And they had started a 7-8 middle school. And I decided to leave my elementary school prematurely to go to this school. It was a really interesting change of pace. I was very sheltered at my original school. Growing up with a neighborhood, it was co-ed.
Right.
I had a ton of friends. I was allowed to be me,
Right.
which is, and what I've learned older is like, I'm different. I'm unique. I'm me. And
Yeah.
I was allowed to like be me.
Yeah.
And I learned later that like maybe being me in an all boys school is not going to work out the same. And it was a like a really unique thing to go through. I remember being like, just trying to like make friends,
Right.
and it didn't work the way I knew.
Right. So, from someone like myself who didn't grow up here, I have no concept of what an all boys school is. It's not something I'm familiar with. But what's the difference in attitude like between that and like a normal high school?
Well, I think, okay, so a big thing with this, and I'll bring it back to my experience with hockey, but I think the thing is that when I went to this private all boys school, I was dealing with a higher class of society,
Ah.
and it was less diverse,
Right.
and it was a lot more macho, and
Gotcha.
it coincided with the fact that we were all like going into puberty,
Yes.
and it probably would have been a good time to be like with girls,
Yes.
and not so much. I think had I gone to that school at like grade 9, it would have been a bit different, but that
Right.
was like a peculiar area of your life to all of a sudden be immersed with like
Yeah.
men who like are 5'1" and 6'4",
Yeah.
you know, and like there was a lot of like bullying and stuff, and
Yeah.
I did not know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
And that was tough. And I went from, with hockey, being like, that was my identity, being a hockey player.
Right.
And I went to a school where 400 alumni played in the NHL for the last 100 years.
Holy
like
crap.
Frank
Yeah.
Mahovlich, Tim Horton, like
Okay.
Eric Lindros. Like
Right.
this was like a hockey mecca.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden in gym class where we played hockey, like I went from like, I'm going to the NHL to like, I'm the worst player in my class.
Oh,
and
wow.
this is what I've been holding my esteem on.
Wow.
And
Okay.
like, and I'm getting bullied. And these guys are like men. And I thought every day, I was like, I just want my elementary school to have a field trip to see me. And I could just show them around this school and
Yeah.
hang out with them instead of be in this situation.
Oh man. That would get you writing songs.
Yeah, it was tough because it was like, you know, it was like a lot to take in. and I was very delicate and sensitive. And I learned how to play that game later, like just to be yourself and be confident and comfortable and that kind of jazz. But it was tough at the time. And I was into music. This school had a phenomenal music program, and I saw the bass clarinet.
Yeah.
Of my classes in grade 7 at this private school, I took a mandatory 10 courses.
Right.
How they do it instead of at high school, instead of bouncing around, you're with your class all day. You just go to different classes together.
Yep.
But it was very immersive. It was Latin, French, art, music. Like I was everything. They were trying to give us a sample size of everything to take it all in.
Right.
I also wasn't a good student. Like, I tried really hard, but didn't have good grades.
Interesting.
And it was the first time I ever realized that intellect could be competitive. And we went from just being a bunch of students in the class to getting our report cards. And then no longer was I like the worst hockey player in my grade. I was also the dumbest kid in my grade too.
Oh my God.
And like, I was like, shit, I'm going to have to really, really, really like hope that I become really good looking or something. Like I was like, I'm fucked. Like I'm just bad at everything. Like this school is just beyond me.
Right.
It got better. I did it for 3 years, but it was like, where am I? Like, who am I? Where's my identity?
Yeah.
Like, where can I hang my hat? And music class was the one spot that I was able to just be myself and be an individual. And I loved music. And in elementary school, I was in the choir. And like, I remember it was a Catholic school, so we'd go to church. And like, before I got into the choir, I remember like, I'd be like singing these songs. And like, I'm pretty good at this.
Right.
And there was a moment also in the 3rd grade where we were doing a medieval times, what do you call them, like plays.
Yeah, yeah.
And the class, the teacher was Mike Sleeth's mother. Just coincidentally, she was our teacher went on mat leave because she had a baby. And coincidentally, one of my best friend, Mike, his mom was our teacher, which is wonderful. She was the best, still is. She was saying, okay, these are the people we're going to vote. Who do you think should be this? And they're like, who's going to be the jester? And they were like, Aaron Poopy's going to be the jester. I mention him by name is because I've been playing music with Aaron in like forever since. It's just funny. He was also in this class. Yeah. And they said, okay, who's going to be the musician? And unanimously they were like, oh, Michael is.
Really?
And I remember that. I was like, oh, really? Oh, okay. You guys are noticing this too? Like, I was like, okay, cool. This is awesome. They played a bunch of instruments at orientation, and they brought out the bass clarinet. I didn't know what that was. And they played it, and it was just beautiful. Right. Our teacher was like an insane clarinetist, but he just played the bass clarinet. It had this bass tone to it. And I really gravitated towards it and found that like I was able to keep up on the music side of things. And that was something that was really fun and kept me like looking forward to something.
Interesting.
Outside of the fact that the bass clarinet is a particularly heavy instrument for a 12-year-old to carry home on the bus, but
like I'm getting shredded on the way home.
Man, I earned like these calluses, like you earn them, you know? Yeah. And you're just switching arms. And it's funny because I now sometimes walk down that street or I'll bike ride and I'll take a shortcut and I'll just think to myself like, it wasn't that far, but like it felt like I was earning something. Like I felt like, you know what, like I'm carrying this thing. Like these are like these little developments of things that you feel later on and you kind of understand and appreciate. Like, you know, coming home from a venue at 3 a.m, it's like, this is where that 5th gear comes in. Yeah, exactly. And it was interesting to learn those things and to see them for the first time coming through. Yeah. Blink-182 was a big band. My friends that I had left at elementary school, Mike and a couple of other friends, Andrew and Christian, they were all getting into music. Right. And I wasn't there every day. So it was like, sometimes conversations were taking place and the ones that I was catching up to at our skateboard sessions weren't the ones that I would have been as keen on. Like I knew we all liked Our Lady Peace and the new Offspring record was like amazing. And I would like to credit my mom in particular for not ever censoring music. Oh, good. We were able to not watch The Simpsons, but we could listen to
Anything you want.
the Bullworth soundtrack, like
Right.
things that were so offensive that like made us cry. I'm outing my brother on this one, but he wanted a record and they gave it to him and he listened to it and he started to cry because it was so offensive. And my parents were like, "That's okay. Like you're not saying it."
Yeah.
They're saying it on the record. And Regan was like, "Oh, you're right."
Your parents were also probably like, "Well, that's encouraging to know that he has the right emotions."
I guess so.
He has the
I
right
mean,
sensitivity to
Listen,
things.
that album was pretty raw. It had Ghetto Superstar on it, which was like a massive hit.
Yeah.
Back to music, you know, I kind of was starting to get interested in like getting a guitar. And
Right. So sorry to cut you off, but because knowing you as a bass player, knowing you as a guitar player, knowing you as a singer, I never knew that your beginning with this was the bass clarinet. People who, especially in rock music, people tend to start with instruments that are a bit more, you know, quote unquote sexy, like guitar, drums, you know, bass, like just something that looks like you can go on stage with and rock out. Not like, I'm going to start with a bass clarinet.
Well, they said that they had said in this orientation, like nobody's getting the saxophone,
Right.
Like that, like don't think that like you're getting the cool instruments. Like we know what we're doing here. This isn't like just like
The
band
saxophone is
class.
the cool
Like,
instrument.
yeah, like this was like a legit operation.
Wow.
Like it was like, you know, if you didn't wear black socks to the concert, like they'd take shoe polish and dye your legs. Like
Wow.
they were like running a tight ship. They actually got in a lot of trouble at our first rehearsal. They called a bunch of kids out and it like they thought it was going to be funny.
Right.
And it did not go off well. It was very embarrassing. These kids were like crying, standing up in front of their parents in this theater. Oof. They had outed them for wearing the wrong socks. And the teacher had done it to an older class. And it was like a big laugh.
Right.
And these kids
we
were
were
just
crying.
so nervous. And it was like, it was an interesting first concert experience.
Oh my God.
The bass clarinet was an interesting instrument to play because nobody knew about it.
Right.
So it was a conversation piece off the bat. It was big. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's expensive.
Yep.
I still don't own one. I will one day. It's a bass instrument that reads treble clef, which was, I think, has shaped a bit of the things I move to musically.
It's very descriptive of you as a musician.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit of my secret resume as a bass player,
Right.
and as a guitar player.
Yeah.
In the sense that like where I feel like I fit is a bit like you're riding with the tubas, but you're not. You're like you're just like you're there, but like
Yeah.
it's a unique instrument. It's very like fifth business.
Interesting. Okay.
But there was unique spots where you got to like do like a flare or stand out. I always remember around like the third act, there'd be like a spot with like the flutes where you would like back them up. And it was unique to find where you fit. There were other days. We did Live and Let Die by Paul McCartney.
Oh, nice.
So if you break down that song, so cool. But like you got 100-piece band. You're
Right.
allocating all the parts to all the instruments.
Yeah.
So you got like where the flutes are hitting those
Yep.
and then you got like the da-na-na, da-na-na. So you got that on like the clarinets, maybe like the trumpets.
Yep.
So that song has for me now iconic bass line of dun 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 dun. Ba-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. So me and Richard Clune, Dickie Clune of the Toronto Marlies, who has a documentary I think coming out this week on Sportsnet, the two of us would sit there. The two bass clarinets of the orchestra just going hoo 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 hoo, and we devised a plan because our guts were hurting so long. Like that's how long. Like
Yeah.
if you think, and then there's that dum ba bum ba bum, timpani's going
No,
off.
that's
and,
a lot of time to hold that down.
Oh my god! So we would play. We both. I'd pretend to play and he'd play it, and then he'd kick my leg, and then I'd take over.
Oh, you guys would switch.
Yeah. So we devised this plan.
That's
I
incredible.
wanna like he's now like a Toronto kind of legend,
Right.
And he is doing like all sorts of stuff and has this amazing story. But I want to one day just get an opportunity to be like, remember when we played the bass clarinet together? And we tag team Live and Let Die. Yeah, he's a good guy.
Amazing.
But and a really good hockey player.
Evidently.
So around this time, got a guitar at Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
I got a Slammer by Hamer.
Oh, I remember those. Yeah.
It was a Les Paul build.
Right.
I got a PV Rage 15-watt amp.
Of course.
My brother got a Slammer by Hamer Explorer.
Of course.
So we got these two guitars. Best Christmas ever. It was amazing. We took the guitars and everything and our stands and we packed them up and we went to our neighbor Andrew Montero's house. His dad had a 1970s Hagstrom.
Oh, wow.
He was the guy that kind of got us going with like, here's a C chord, here's a D chord. And I remember like getting these guitars and it was the coolest thing because it was just something I wanted to do and my friends were getting into it. And we had been pretty aggressive skateboarders.
Right.
And we also knew that like we weren't doing anything any more amazing, like what they were doing in the magazines. And we were watching, people our age start to kind of, really go for it. And we were like, I'm not going to go down this 12 stairs step. Like, hey man, if I get a kickflip this afternoon, that's awesome. Great. And we started to move more to our like playing guitar, and my friends started their first band, Social Tea Biscuits. It was Mike and Mike and Christian Oswald, who was the singer and the guitar player. Mike Carey was the bass player, and Michael Sleeth started playing the drums.
So they were basically like recreating Blink?
Absolutely.
Yep.
They played Blink-182 songs, and they started to have me come over with my guitar, and I would sit on the floor in Mike's super small bedroom, and they would turn the amps way too loud and just blow my ears off. But it was amazing to watch. And I, as I wasn't following all these conversations, it was just so insane that like all of a sudden my friends had this room of music and amps and all of this stuff. And I was just so excited. But I also remember, they wanted to have me play a song with them. And like, I tried to stand up and play it. And they're like, maybe you should sit down and play the guitar. Like, I knew that I was not there. I was at the bottom of the totem pole, but it didn't feel like I was the worst at hockey. This was different. This was like, I'm new at this. Yeah. But if my friends are ahead of me and they're going to show me, I could get a leg up here. Yeah. And what we started to develop is, this is 2001. The internet's okay. Yeah. But we could start downloading tabs. And I had a subscription to Guitar World. Right. And we would together as a team read the tabs, and we would get Christian, who was the best guitar player. Mm-hmm. He'd learn the solo to you just take some time, little bit
in the middle.
The middle.
Yeah. Andrew
Alien Air? No.
No, fucking
Americans.
Whatever, Eat World. Jimmy Eat World. No, Andrew.
But that was like, so we did it, and I just remember, like, so we would like, what are those notes? 3, 2, 3, 4, 3. No, you're doing it wrong. And then he would learn it, and he'd teach it to us. And like, all of a sudden, like, we start going there. Right. So at the private boys' school, they have a rock night. My two friends who are also going to St. Mike's, Joe and John Moyer, are brothers. One of them's playing the bass, the other one's playing the drums. Right. Let's start our Blink-182 band. And what was really cool is that we were all playing together. We created our own music room, our own setup. It was so awesome. It was just like, just even thinking about it, like that room, like just like, it was just awesome. Like we had a spot to just practice, and we'd do it every Saturday. And it was just this exciting thing. We all played on the same hockey team. So we talk about it at hockey, and all the Social Tea Biscuit guys were there too. And it was, again, like we had something to catch up to, but now it's as a band. So now we're a team, and they're a team, and we're making our xpage.com band websites with guest book and a counter and, digital graphics and like we're a thing.
Yeah.
Like you can go to that website, you can enter and like, wow, we've got 16 views. And, my buddy's showing his cousin in Halifax that we're a band and we have a band photo. And all of a sudden it's like, it's this thing and it's like your identity. And
Yeah.
so then we had our first show and it was in the gymnasium, which was just this insane sound trap.
Yeah.
And the bands are like, the older guys are all fronting on us like, yeah, so you play a show before. We're like, no, it's our first one. They're like, yeah, yes. Keep away from that Supernova stuff, man, which is like pay to play. Kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
They're like, man, don't do that Supernova stuff. They just take money, man. You know what, man? We'll see if you're, it's just like, oh yeah, you play chop suey. Like, how do you play on the guitar? You do that little like extra note thing, or do you just play a bar chord? And they're like, what are they talking about? These like, oh my, and you're looking at them like they're like Buddhist monks and they're like this secret to the world. And like, and there was one band that were like a legit band from the school and they came in with like, they're like Marshall stacks. And one guy had like, and I think it was like of the time too, like guitar magazines, like advertisements, like you have two guitar players, one plays Marshall, one plays Mesa.
Yeah.
And then the bass player had an Eden, like a 15 and a 410. Like they brought like the heat, and it was like, man,
and you can't hear the drums.
No, but it was like, wow, this is like a super legit show.
Right.
This is like, wow, this is like a real thing. And it's
we're
like,
out here with our PV Rage and our
yeah. Oh, at this time I had a PV Bandit.
There we go.
So I will tell you about that. But we are like in the gym and we had like, a meeting before and it was like, you're getting that feeling that, the feeling now, that feeling of like, you're going to play a show or something exciting is going to happen. And like, you've rehearsed and you know what you're doing. And there's like that calm before the storm. That's like the worst.
Yeah. I hate that.
That's why musicians smoke time. That's like the like
there's nothing I hate more than showing up at the venue, you've done your sound check, everything's ready to go, and now you just have to wait. And the closer you get to the show, the more it sucks.
Yeah. And like you're like, I've practiced these songs like a million times, so I'm not worried. I'm not singing at this point.
Yeah.
Our drummer is singing,
right,
which is a great idea. But he actually had a really great voice. And John and I were too scared. So we're like, awesome. Just that feeling that 3 hours felt like an eternity and you wanted it to go faster and slower at the same time.
Yeah.
So Social Tea Biscuits go on. They perform. They're vets at this point. This is their third show. And then a band goes up who are younger than us. I was in grade 9 at the time.
Right.
They have this band called Expo.
Okay.
Al Capo and Adam Bianchi.
Oh, okay.
And they're Blink-182, starting a band too. They go up and they play. And that was their first show.
I remember you telling me that story that you both played your first show together.
Which is like amazing because 18 years later, we're talking to them and congratulating them on like their like very successful full length album on Anthem Records.
Yeah.
And it's something that like I'm listening to every day and not in a pandering way. Like I genuinely am enjoying it the way I enjoyed records when we were that age.
Yeah.
And it's just like such a beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah.
So these guys stick with it.
No, totally. And I remember, I've met them through playing with Ascots and, thought like, wow, like here's another band who's like going for it with like unapologetic alternative rock.
Yeah.
Not necessarily going with like what's cool right now or what's like acceptable. They're just kind of doing their own thing. And it's really cool to see that they found their way to exist and be successful. And and like their stuff sounds amazing. Like I listened to, there were I think 2 singles or maybe 3 singles off this record before like they dropped a full album. Mm-hmm. And yeah, man, it's fucking awesome. You do this, you see bands, start and die within no time. Yeah. And it's just cool to see that they're actually like, they stuck it through and, they got that record deal and everything. And it's fucking kudos to them.
It is so cool because I get to watch. There's like stories that you tell yourself or hear, and now I have a story that I'll share.
Yes.
And that is so cool because sometimes you're making decisions in your life that are very, very hard, and you don't know that this moment or this decision to stick with something is going to become fruitful.
Yeah.
And, there's a song on the album, Undercover, that is just like so amazing. And it's such a beautiful song. And I think about those kids like playing
that you played that
guys.
show who were Expo.
Yeah. And like they were a year younger at a time where that was like an era younger.
Yeah.
So like where we were at with Blink-182, they were like even more into it because they were more younger and influenced, and they had like the Mark Hoppus bass and the Tom DeLonge Stratocaster. Like they had the part like nailed.
Wow.
And it's great because Adam, like they did a making of documentary.
Yep.
And like Adam's playing the same Tom DeLonge signature guitar in the video, recording the solos and stuff.
Wow.
And like I appreciate that they have continued to like place their gear from that time.
Right.
It just, I don't know, it's so cool because it was a little lame at the time, like, because we were older, like, oh, you know how that's kind of escaped music, like the whole like positioning or prospering or posing and those types of stuff. That's kind of changed, and I'm really glad. At the time, like you were your CD wallet, like that was your identity.
Yep.
And you could be into Tool, or you could, your depths of music were very much an extension of like who you were.
Yeah.
But I watched them play, and they were good. They were good. They were uppity. They were jumpity. They were they were the infancy of what they are today.
Right.
So you saw something there, and they kind of ran with it. But when we were allowed to go on the stage, I was terrified. My legs locked.
Oh.
And, I'm looking at a gymnasium. It's like 4:45 in the afternoon. This is a middle school talent show.
Yeah.
And it's not that well attended.
No.
It's a super loud gym where everything's just bouncing.
Yeah.
The amps are way too loud. The drums are hit too hard. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Nice.
And it was this moment of there was like a song, and I just remember in my head being like, all you have to do is move your left leg and you've won. And like I'm playing the notes, and all of a sudden I just let it go. And it was like, as soon as my legs just stopped being so tense, it was like
fun.
Best feeling ever.
Yeah.
And it was really cool, and I had an identity in it. And honestly, that moment on in that school, like nothing really bothered me.
Yeah.
I was no longer a reflection of my marks or how good of a hockey player I was or how fast I could run. It's like I had my thing now.
Yeah.
And I remember kids kind of finding out that I was playing guitar and stuff, and they were like, oh yeah, I have my dad has like this kind of guitar and stuff. And it was like, big deal, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Like, I play the fucking guitar. Like, do you? No.
Okay.
So
great.
I don't care anymore. Go do your thing. I'm doing mine. I have a thing. I have a lane. And it was a wonderful experience.
It's, I find there's such comfort. I mean, for all the suffering you have to endure as somebody who wants to make music for a living, which is it's just the truth. It's a lot of, a lot of grief, so to speak, because it just takes a lot out of you. But for all of that, there's, at least for those of us who really sort of go into it full on, I think there's such a sense of comfort and relief knowing that this is what you're into. Because, I mean, when I think about myself, I'm so thankful, now that I look back at life, to think like, wow, I knew from a very early age that this is what I wanted to do. And it's just really, it's kind of like finding a religion. It's like saying, I'm a Buddhist, or I'm a Christian or a Jew or Muslim or whatever. And it just kind of like, it narrows down the decision making process that you have to have, because you already know where you want to go. So, certain religions just kind of immediately disqualify certain practices and certain things. For example, if you're Muslim, you just don't, what am I going to drink tonight is not an issue because you just don't drink.
Yeah.
So not that I have anything against drinking or not drinking, but it's just, it helps define your life choices and what you do and what you give yourself into. And I think as a musician, right there and then, that point of confidence, you're like, oh, I don't care about how I do in this, that, or the other, because I found the thing. And nothing feels better. And I think that, I've always said, and probably have said it so many times, I mean, I don't make music for the sake of just making music. I make music because I love playing shows. There is no better feeling to me in the world. That's why I've never had any addiction problems, because I've always found the highest highs in making music and playing it to people. It doesn't matter what capacity. And I think
Dude, it's fucking odd. Like, I want to say like, yeah, it's so awesome, but it's like, I'm in awe of it.
yeah. And watching it too, like watching people do it is something that sometimes can give you even more of a satisfaction, as if you were on stage. Like there's a level of, especially if it's a band that you really love. Like there's a band I really love called Rival Sons. And I've missed them on so many occasions coming to Toronto. And then finally last summer, I saw them at the band shell. And I just remember, having listened to this band so much, following all their releases, all their music, I felt like they personally touched me in a certain way. I don't know why. I don't know what it is about them. I'm not supposed to be so partial to them, but it's just something about them really caught my ear, and it really resonates with me. And then having seen them playing that show, I honestly felt like almost, this is going to sound so corny, but I felt like they were on stage and they could read my mind and go, oh, that's what you want us to do. Okay, here, we're going to do it. But wait, there's more. Like, just when I thought they just kind of gave me what I came to see, then they just blew my mind so much more that I was like, I don't think I can feel any better than the way I'm feeling right now, even though there's some, sweaty dudes pressed up right against me, and I'm shorter than most people. So I'm having a hard time. I have to maneuver to see this band, but just the bass frequencies and the guitar solos and just the energy of the vocals, all of it together is like, when you experience that both as a maker of it and as a consumer, I think it gives you so much relief in life, because it disqualifies a lot of things that you thought you'd be doing, and you don't care about them anymore. And
no,
that's, so
I think that's why like people that jump out of planes more than 3 times become instructors.
Yeah, exactly.
Like somebody's like, I'm an instructor. I'm like, good for you. But like,
I'm going to play that Russian roulette for the rest of my life. That's what I want to do.
I tapped into something, and I'm glad that like the thing that we tap into is on the ground. But also I feel like, the experience of doing it and achieving that high is like, I feel like it gets better the more that I appreciate it. And the thing that's made me appreciate it is living, as much life as possible. Yeah. And it's weird because like there's sometimes, if it's been a long period of time or like a gig gets canceled or something like that, so now it's like 3 months away, or just, sometimes like you're just not playing. Yeah. And there have been some periods of my long periods of my life where I've had like steady gigs I've relied on. Yeah. And it's like you go to get your fix, and I played Mondays at 11 p.m. till 2 a.m. to nobody. Yeah. And I had a girlfriend at the time who was like, why are you leaving? Like, why are you doing this? Like,
you're going out to play to nobody?
Yeah, our relationship was like falling apart. And I was like, I've got to go. Yeah. Like, the guys need me. They're like, they don't need, they're like,
yes, they do.
They're like, I need them. I'm lying about them needing me. I'm like, I need them. Like, I need this. Like, I can't do the rest of this week if I don't get this?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
but that rest of the week also enabled or allowed me to like really appreciate what it was.
yeah.
And with the Moyers, we did these talent shows every year at the school. And for the second one, we had been rehearsing for an entire year at this
Right.
point. But like, you know, also a lot of other stuff was happening. Like we were like, you know, we were 13. So
Yeah.
we were doing stuff. I got a job as a referee.
Right.
And that was a really defining thing for me as a person because
You have to deal with people. You're like, people are looking up to you to make decisions.
yeah. Well, also, so I had grown up in a hockey rink.
Yeah.
You know, I had played and I had seen heated exchanges
Yeah.
that are like terrible.
Yeah.
And I can't believe that they happen. And parents and kids lose themselves. And I
Yeah.
think it was a lot more acceptable in the 90s than it is now, hopefully. But I saw a lot of that. And then as a 12, 13-year-old, when I became a referee as my first job,
Yep.
I witnessed the experience of putting on a different style of jersey and having adults like scream at you.
Yeah.
And I had like anxious, I don't want to say anxiety because like it wasn't something inside me. It was something being thrown at me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like an energy of like a 45-year-old father of three, like ripping into me about his lot in life. And it's about this is offside or not.
yeah.
And I had some like harrowing stories where like people threw things at me. I had an arena. I had St. Mike's Arena, this beautiful building that I used to sneak and go eat my lunch by myself and just to have like a moment.
Yeah.
Just watch the ice cool. It was like serene. At this same building, people are throwing things at me, and my linesmen fought like other humans. Like it was insane. I called like 72 penalty minutes on. It was like a boxing day, and it was like so heavy because I think my whole life I wanted to be treated like an adult, like an equal,
Right.
like responsible, and I
Yep.
felt like I was.
Right.
And I was and wasn't, but then to be actually treated like horribly, but like
Yeah.
equally, like I wasn't, they never gave me kid gloves. They would
Right.
tell me off.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting experience because it gave me like a fire.
Yeah.
And I was like, it was a lot to hold on to. And also like you're starting to get into girls and you're like starting to get hormones. And that second show, I just exploded.
Wow.
Because it had been a year since.
Yeah.
And it was like, I had a year to think about doing it again.
Wow.
And it was like this it was just like, I broke like 3 guitar strings in the first song. I had to borrow somebody's guitar. There was blood everywhere. I was like, I'm the fucking coolest. And like, it was the most, it was 10 times better, but also it was like, I was like, oh, if I like and I was singing some songs. I was like, if I go for this, like,
Yeah.
people are going to pay attention if I just lose my mind
Yeah.
and kind of look cool. I don't think I look cool at all. I've seen photos. Oh my God. Like some of the
But you
fashion
felt cool.
choices. I felt cool and I let the demon out.
Exactly.
And it was just like, I remember after the show, this girl who became my high school sweetheart, like came up to me and was like, oh, hey, how are you? You're really cool. Like maybe, yeah. And I was like very excited that something I did attracted the
reaction.
opposite sex.
Yeah.
I had a reaction and that was really cool. And I awkwardly pursued this young lady for about a year after.
Nice.
And we then dated before she went to university and subsequently dumped me because she moved away.
Because you realize, okay, well, musicians are musicians.
Well, I mean, like I was like 16 at this point. I also changed schools.
Right.
At this time, going into grade 9, my brother 2 years younger than me, grade 7, went to the school, hated it immediately, was like, I'm out immediately. Mm-hmm. One of my best friends, Christian, the guitar player,
Yep.
who's very smart. His mother demanded that he go to this school. So he started as a grade 9.
Yep.
He hated it as well. So both of them were transferred out in the first month to start the next year at the school where all our friends were.
Right.
My parents came to me and they said, do you want to maybe make a switch?
Yeah.
And I said, no, I'm going to stick through this. And I
Right.
thought to myself, like, no, like, you've made your bed. Like, you can do this.
Yeah.
And then I woke up the next morning and I thought, no, I'm
outta here.
not going to do that. And I transferred schools. My friend Rodney Hannafin, who became the singer for this band,
Yep.
he said to me that he didn't think it was the right thing to have somebody go to school by themselves on their first day.
Yep.
So he had his dad come pick me and Andrew Montero, our neighbor, up.
Yep.
We went to school together. And the first 20 minutes of being at that school, I met my lifelong group of friends that we've been friends together
Wow.
ever since. And there were all these Blink-182 style bands were now getting into like Sonic Youth and
Right.
getting into other music. And my friend group had kind of met two other friend groups and formed like a super group.
Oh, wow.
And it's been very cool because it's led to pretty much everything I've done since then
Yeah.
to this day. Like,
Yeah, because it's one thing about you that I always notice. It's like there's always a friend, always a childhood friend. It's like it's a never ending well of childhood friends who are involved in anything and any subject that can come up. Pretty much.
yeah.
It's like I don't know if you have a pilot friend, but I wouldn't be surprised at this point.
No, yes. Well, yes, I do. I have a couple, but
There you go.
I think the thing is that I just, for one reason or another, this group that I went to school with, that I joined up with, a lot of us had formed these long-term relationships when we were in
Right.
school playing hockey with each other. We were really cool with everyone, and we, started going to shows and
Yeah.
started to go to places like the Big Bop for the all ages shows, and started to hang out. Maybe started to like, have a couple beers together, and
Right.
and we were very like mature, or like, hey, we could, instead of like getting wasted at a park, it was more like, hey, let's go to this bar, and if we act like we're 25,
They'll let us in.
they'll let us in. Maybe we can, split a pitcher, And it's like, so we would like go buy suits at Value Village and like act the part. And I think it was like a really good thing to do the bad. We were doing bad things, but it was in a good way.
Yeah.
Where it was like, hey, let's like be mature and civilized. And I think that it did us well because we were taken more seriously than we should have.
Yeah.
But also entering, a musical sphere at a young age, it was paramount to know how to hold yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's, just by walking into the music world, you're watching artists, and usually by the time the artists, you become aware of them, they're adults.
Yeah.
And then, by them being adults, it means that they're either smoking, drinking, having sex, or doing drugs or whatever. So it's like you're almost prematurely thrust into that just because that's the people you idolize. That's what they do,
Yeah.
like I remember when I was a kid, watching Pantera's like home videos for like, cause they would like release these like home videos for fans. It would be like a VHS tape, like 2 hours of just absolute mayhem. Like maybe a little bit of clips from their shows, but like just them destroying hotel rooms, backstages, all that stuff. And all you would ever see was them drinking Jack Daniels. I knew nothing about whiskey, but the first time I saw a duty free, the first thing I bought was a fucking bottle of Jack Daniels, because I was like, shit, man. And then I had a swig of it and I was like, what the fuck? This thing is horrible. It takes a second to get used to, but they drink it like it's cranberry juice.
Yeah, and it just looks so cool. And we went through that, like hanging out in these venues, and like, we had played like, a couple shows. Social Tea Biscuits, like the band of the future, that they played at the cathedral, and that was like a super big deal.
Yeah.
So they were the first band, the best band. They got in. One of their older brothers got them like an opening slot.
Right.
Super big deal to be at a stage that probably had Broken Needles on it, and it was just crazy. And we learned later on that if you went to the bar for $5, they'd sell you a bottle of Molson Canadian.
Yep.
But the security guard would come by immediately and just take them out of your hands because they knew you were underage.
Oh.
So they'd sell it to you and then take it from you.
Oh, wow.
Just to make money. So we would like just try to like drink a beer between us. It was wild, but it was, yeah, so crazy. But you know, we started to like, all of a sudden it was like, oh wow, we can go other places. Like we can do things. And I think our parents kind of think it's cool because we're like showing initiative.
Yeah.
And we're not.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, and you know, the other like really beneficial and easy thing is it's like, well, who are you going to be there with? And it's like, Andrew Montero, Christian Oswald, Michael Sleeth, Michael Carriott, you know, the 4 best friends you vetted when I was 3 years old.
Yeah.
So it was also like a really good way to like go out, is that like I'm with, you know, if I'm going to fuck up, at least I'm fucking up with them.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
They know my mom's number, you know,
Yeah,
like it
yeah,
was,
yeah.
And I think that was like a really nice thing too, that happened, that like there was a lot of trust.
Yeah.
You know, if something bad happened, like one of the parents would take care of the community of boys. And
I had a similar but opposite story to that. Not to me personally, but the group of friends that I was with growing up in the little town of Kadima, is that when we were like 13 or 14, I was like super against drugs for whatever reason. I don't really know why.
Right.
Like specifically pot. I would
right.
do anything else.
Can you pass that joint, by the way? It's killing me.
But anyways, so they so a bunch of my really good friends, like they were like, me and my best friend weren't into pot at all, and like, but all of our friends were getting into it, and it was like at the age of like 13, 14, and they were just like, they had like this little, they built like this little shack in one of my buddy's backyards, and they were just like, they'd get there every night they could and just get high off their minds. And one of my other buddies, his mom hired a private investigator because she thought something was up. And the private investigator took photos of all those kids and gave it to the mother. And she knew all those kids. She called everybody's parents. It was really, really bad. I remember that thinking like, Jesus, thank God I'm not involved.
Well, you know what's interesting is that there was an event, one of the first joints that was ever consumed by, you know, it was like one joint. There were like 17 of us.
Right.
Somebody saw and told our parents.
No.
But it was like, maybe you were there. I had red hair, so I kind of stick out.
Yeah.
But it was like a maybe. And we've yet to figure out who it is.
Right.
But it developed like this weird thing with all of us where we were like, like this neighborhood has eyes. And so we were like, okay, we got to be crafty with this now. And there was another time where all my friends got caught and they were smoking pot in one of my friends, now I won't say names, one of my friends' mother's cars, and he aerosoled it out when she came home from somewhere she was, a vacation spot, and turned the car on when he got home, and all the smoke blew out of the air conditioners.
Oh my God.
And she was like, and so, yeah, it was terrible. And so I was waiting for the call, like 2 weeks, it finally came to me. And I wasn't there. My parents came and picked me up because I had like a hockey practice that morning. So I was like, no, it wasn't me. Like, you picked me up. Like, it's like, check the receipts, you know?
Your Honor, I have
And they were like, oh, I guess you're right. So like, I remember just going to school the next day being like,
I'm clean.
I got out. Like, everybody's grounded. Everybody's been like waiting for the call. Like, you knew that like one guy would be like a shade of white because he was waiting. And then he'd be like, the next day he'd come to school. He's like, I got booked. You're next McDonnell. And I'm like, no, it's not coming to me.
Wow.
But it was, those types of things were very interesting because they kind of prepared us for, you know, the next step.
All right. Hey, folks, this is the end of episode number 1. This ended up being a really, really long podcast, so I figured it would be good to chop it up into 2 different parts. And I will post the next part, I think, just consecutively after. And then, you know, you don't have to exhaust your mind and ears listening to 2 hours of us talking. You can kind of split it up into 2 and hit it up whenever you feel like it. Also, if you'd like to find out more about Mike McDonnell, I'll put links to all of his musical work on the description of the podcast, and you're welcome to go check it out and show Mike McDonnell some love. He's a dear, dear friend, and I very much appreciate him doing this podcast. And I want to thank you, the listeners, for listening through my first ever podcast. Hope you stick around. Hope you grow with me. I'm still figuring this out. You know, it takes a bit of time. It takes a bit of figuring out. I'm doing these intros a little bit after having taped a couple of episodes, and I'm still learning. And so if you're there hanging out with me, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Before things get too involved, or when you believe, before doubt has